Joining me now is Alaudin Ullah to talk about his new play, Dishwasher Dreams. Dishwasher Dreams is a companion piece to your documentary, In Search of Bengali Harlem. Can talk about what inspired you to make a play and what inspired the type of play that you have?
Well, when I was working on this documentary, it was a journey to really figure out who my father was and ultimately my parents. So we had basically had I had such a transformative experience at just exploring this documentary that I thought that it would be interesting to dramatize it because I came up at a time where there weren't really a lot of South Asian actors or comedians. And when I came to Los Angeles, which is where I am here right now, there just wasn't really a lot of parts for South Asians. So I wanted to create this parallel story where it's me coming at a point in my career, a crossroads, where I have to decide whether or not I want to play this stereotypical role, which is a terrorist. And as I'm contemplating that, I'm starting to reminisce about all the stories that my father told me. So it's kind of a parallel story, much in a similar way that my documentary is, where I'm having to make a tough decision, which could have a real impact on my career. And whether or not I want to make that decision, I take the audience on a journey where they really get to see my father's experience in America coinciding with my childhood in East Harlem. So it is funny. There's a lot of funny moments, but it's just taking the audience kind of in this journey of what I went through. And for me, there's nothing like live performance. I love film. I've done TV. I've done animation. I love that, but there is nothing like live performance. It's the most addicted drug. And even though I love directing, in my heart, I miss performing so much. So once the pandemic was over, I said I want to do this show, and we've been taking it all over the country, and it's coming to San Diego in a couple of weeks. So that pretty much, in the gist, summarizes what the show is. It's a simple story, yet there's a lot of nuance in that story.
And off of that, there's something interesting about your style of your incorporating music as well.
Yeah, well, a few years back at the Public Theater, um, wow, this is maybe like 15 years ago. I was really just tired of touring. I was just tired of stand up. And a friend of mine gave me free tickets to go see Look I Want the Blues by the amazing Ruben Santiago Hudson. And he told a story about his life, and it was scored to a blues musician, a guitarist. And right there at that moment, I knew what I really wanted to do. It was like the light bulb just went out. And I knew in American theater there just wasn't a lot of musicals or shows that were scored to a tabla. So being that I'm a percussionist, I thought it would be fascinating to bring the tabla in this show with what I do, which is storytelling. So I don't think there's any show in American theater like this.
Part of the life of a performer is being vulnerable and being on stage and putting everything out there, and yours is so much tied to your life story. What is that like to put so much of yourself out there for a live audience?
Well, being a comedian, the comedians that I love, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, their whole essence was being vulnerable. So that's kind of the school of comedy that I came up with. And I wanted to really do a show where people get to see what I experienced. So it is autobiographical, much in the same way the satire Hollywood Shuffle, the film was about how African American deals with typecasting. I want the audience to go with me on the journey. It's almost like I bring the audience in the room with me at the auditions, how casting directors talk to you, just experiencing the discrimination, but also the absurdity of what we go through as comedians and actors. And then to show the connection to our parents, who we think we're the only ones and that our parents don't understand us. But, excuse me, our parents have dealt with this 30, 40, 50 years ago. So they have a different experience, but a very similar experience. And that's what I really want to show the audience, the connection. The person least likely connected to your experience is your parents. They just don't really talk about what they experience. So for me, coming to Los Angeles, I felt like a foreigner because I didn't, it's a car culture. I don't drive. And everything in Los Angeles is different. So when I came here at 2021, I felt like a foreigner. So it was like an epiphany. I was like, well, if I'm going through all this, what was it like for my father and my mother to come to, New York in the 40s and the 50s? What was that like? So I kind of show the connections. It's comical, it's funny, but there are some moving moments where I have to make a decision about compromise, integrity, and not realizing that my parents already had to make those decisions decades ago. So for me, I felt very comfortable being honest with the audiences because, just like Richard Pryor and George Carlin, a lot of their comedy is based on honesty. That's where the best humor comes from.
Your Dishwasher Dreams shows coming up. What do you hope audiences take away from the show?
Well, I hope they have a good time because I think for me, the bottom line is I want audience to be entertained, to laugh. If they want to cry, it's okay to cry. But I want audiences to go on a journey with me. And I feel like we're in an era where artists are trying to pander. And I think the best art is when you go on a journey with someone and you really feel something. You come away learning something and something that when you before you walked into that room you didn't know. So I always feel like I want the audience to leave with something. And so I think about this joke, this story that Richard Pryor told Barbara Walters, which I think is kind of like the code that I like to live with as an artist, is that when Barbara Walters knew him in the 60s, he was only performing for what's called the sort of the black audience, right? And that was called the Chitlin Circuit. And she said, "You only had black audiences, but now that I see you, your audience is mixed, and sometimes there's more white people than there are black people in the audience." And I worry about this too because when I started, I was doing South Asian audiences, I was doing black audiences, very urban. But now in theater, the audience is white. So Richard Pryor's response to Barbara Walters was, I want both audiences to be sitting together. So that way, if I talk about race or oppression or poverty, I want that white person in the audience to go, oh my God, I didn't know that this exists in America. And I want that black person sitting right next to that lady going, this happens to me every day, Jack, every day. And I feel with my shows, this has happened a lot, especially with issues of being Islamic, because when people see my show, for example, my love for the Yankees and how I tried for years to get my parents to buy me tickets to go to Yankee Stadium, and they were like, no, 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 we don't have any money. And then when I take my parents to Yankee Stadium, it's such a moving experience. After the show, there's white people saying, this is how I felt about the Boston Red Sox. This is how I felt about the Cubs. They realize that they're more connected to me than they aren't. And it's not a Muslim experience, it's a human experience. So that's what I want the audience to take away, and that even in our differences, we're alike. Yes.
Well, we wish you a wonderful theater run and break a leg.
Thank you so much.